All right, so in this video, I'm going to break down concepts like trauma and other forms of mental and emotional distress in a very grounded and a very functional kind of way. I think this is useful because it puts these terms in these concepts within a context that you can then mechanically and functionally interact with and take action on versus what oftentimes occurs, which is just more or less an abstract sort of analysis that doesn't necessarily have a real interaction with practicality. Because there's many, of course, many different ways we can approach subjects, many different forms of analysis, many different contexts, many different schemas, many different frameworks, many different models, many different modalities, many different approaches, many different interpretations, etc. Personally speaking, I prefer things to where you can do analysis, you can use the mind in a clear, concise, organized way that then leads to tangible, real outcomes and allows you the opportunity to actually interact with these things, with these concepts, with these dynamics in a real sort of way that makes you more empowered as an individual, as opposed to just pure abstraction or analysis or just talking about things. So I'm going to do this through giving a few different really simple examples physiologically and then transferring those principles across and showing how these dynamics play out and then showing how you can start to maybe interact with these things in slightly a different way. And sometimes just having a different context, just having a different mode of interacting with things is really the difference between producing outcomes that are positive and then producing outcomes that are maybe not. So just as an example to illustrate this, let's say you had like really a lot of, really bad neck and shoulder tension, right? Which a lot of people do because they spend a lot of times hunched over looking at their computers, or maybe they've had a very stressful life or a lot of emotional turmoil, things of this nature, which have put glitches and tension and chronic patterns into their nervous system, right? But let's just say, for the sake of example, it's up here in the neck and then causes people to be like this, or some manner of distorted pattern right here. So what that means is, functionally speaking, let's say you want to do a movement like this, or you want to, reach back and do something, or you want to, move around or have really nice neck mobility, right? What happens is, because of that glitch, because of that pressure, because of that constriction in your system, you're going to reach a certain range of motion, and your system's going to go, it's going to lock, it's going to freeze, it's going to glitch out in some way, or it will just basically be like, yeah, I can't move more than here, or I can't move my head more than this, or you'll have some basically frozen, inhibited movement within your body. Versus if that area is open and clear and everything's moving, you have really great mobility, really great range of motion, and that system or that movement that you're trying to do won't glitch out in the middle of it. It won't. You'll try to do it and it will, or it will freeze, or it will lock. And you know what I'm talking about. If you have things in your body, things and movements that you try to go through, you'll have those glitches. You'll have those things that lock up. You'll have those things that freeze, depending on where you might happen to have that tension. As another example, let's say you have an ankle injury or something, right? So you have that injury, and let's say maybe you get rid of it, and you heal from it, right? But then, because you had that injury, all those tissues in that part of your body, and basically even we could say probably your whole fascial network, depending on how bad that was, probably started to adapt and contort and try to find equilibrium and homeostasis around that injury. So even though it might technically be gone and you might technically be healed, in reality, you're basically just living your life in reaction to that injury because of the way your tissues and the way your physiology adapted to and formed itself around that. So to me, that's basically just really functionally living in a less efficient state, because all the energy that could be going into just feeling normal as a human being is going into your body to try to adapt and maintain that distorted pattern, which is, just to say, not very efficient. Versus if you do something, or let's say you had that injury and you just completely unwound it and removed it from your tissue matrix, from your system, so that it's not causing any ripples or distortions throughout the rest of your body, then I would call that actually being healed. So the same mechanics, the same principles that I just illustrated through these simple physiological mechanics or examples transfer over to psychologically how we interrelate with things as well. Because typically how we relate to experiences is through our nervous system. And the quality of our nervous system determines typically, to a large degree, the quality of the experience that we have. So if we have these glitches in our nervous system, we encounter an experience and it glitches. But that glitch might be anxiety, it might be depression, it might be irrational anger, it might be panic, it might be fear. But in reality, it's just the same kind of glitch as like if we have a bunch of neck and shoulder tension and we're trying to move and it's like, ooh, it pulls. And it's the same thing going back to if you've had an injury, or like maybe say you hurt your ankle and you try to put full weight on it. It's like, ooh, that hurts. I can't do that. It stings, it glitches, it shocks. Like it has that effect, right? It sends that effect through your nervous system. And it's the same thing mentally speaking within yourself. There's certain parts to where it's going to take a full load, or it's going to take a full pressure from the outside world, and it says, it hurts. I can't do that. Ooh, yeah, I can't. No. But instead of it just being as simple as that, it's anxiety, fear, depression, irrational anger, or some other, ridiculously uncomfortable kind of response. It's the same principle, it's the same mechanics that are playing out. Versus if that underlying quality is just relatively normal and healthy, it's just, okay, no problem. Like I can put full weight on either one of my ankles right now because they're not injured and there's not that glitch. There's nothing in that system, so it's fine. Just like the same principle applies. So how that usually relates to maybe a more mental or emotional level would be how we are relating to our sense of value or sense of power or sense of safety. Meaning, depending on our life experience, there could easily be some injury or some glitch within those three types of dynamics, let's say, which tend to interrelate. But for the sake of simplicity, each person tends to maybe have one over the other that's more of an issue. Or if someone has a really dysfunctional development, then they might have all three. It just kind of depends, and that's something that people have to figure out for themselves. But basically, it's the same process where instead of your ankle being injured and then you try to step on it and it's like, ooh, that hurts. Basically, it's some encounter or some experience of life is basically putting load on our relationship to that dynamic or that concept or that principle. And then depending on the state of our response or whatever degree of injury is there, then that's going to be what we're going to experience. If it's completely normal and smooth, then it's just sort of no big deal. It's like I don't have any injuries in my body, so I can just go for a walk. Well, I don't have injuries that are harming my ability to walk, so I can just go for a walk. But there's times like I've hurt an ankle or hurt a knee or stubbed my toe where when I walked it was uncomfortable. Similar sort of idea. And then depending on our life experience, what kind of injury we sustained means that basically our personality or our nervous system is really shaped around trying to find some degree of homeostasis and balance and adaptation to whatever that thing was. So it's almost like a wrinkle in the shirt or whatever. So I think that more or less explains the principle and the concept and the idea that I'm trying to get across. And I think that it puts it in a much more functional, useful, mechanical way. Because if you actually just strip away, let's say, the story, the emotion, and the memory, the narrative, you strip away all of these things and you just break it down to the simplest, most basic, fundamental things of what the nervous system actually experiences and goes through and what the actual mechanics are. And really at a certain point, what you actually experience at a core level, I'm quite confident that it's more or less what I'm saying here, meaning these certain glitches in the nervous system as a when glitches in the nervous system that come out when trying to go through a certain range of motion or trying to take on a certain amount of stress or a certain amount of load psychologically or emotionally. And I think just looking at it in this way empowers an individual to say, okay, well, how can I start actually smoothing out my nervous system and removing these glitches and these blocks and these hindrances throughout my tissue matrix and throughout my physiology and throughout my nervous system. And then the same thing starts to apply and translate through behaviorally speaking. And this is why, classically speaking, various internal arts have always been very healing because they smooth out the nervous system. And that's not their goal, that's not their aim. It's just a side effect of making the body healthier, is smoothing things out. And then also, things like lion's mane, or especially at least the one that I sell that has, the industry leading levels of arenosines and hericenones. For me personally, that's been very helpful, very beneficial, very supportive in, neurogenesis, but also being neuroprotective and helping my nervous system be literally nourished in terms of stimulating nerve growth factor and brain nerve growth factor and these different things. So at least for me, internal arts, lion's mane, and neuroptimal neurofeedback been very quite useful in smoothing out these glitches and removing these injuries from my actual tissue matrix so that I'm not having to do all these coping mechanisms and all these different things just to exist, which that's like coping is not the same thing as genuinely healing. It's not the same thing as genuinely being over something. Being over it is kind of just like being over it and just moving on. And I think unfortunately where we are now in modern times, it tends to trend towards what I said from the beginning, which is abstract context and abstract analysis that's heavily emotionalized and very abstract, that doesn't necessarily lend itself to a context that's actionable and manageable. Like the best people can do is like sprinkle a little mindfulness on it or just be aware of it, and that will somehow magically speaking make it better, when actuality a lot of times it just makes it worse, because now you're just more aware of how bad you feel, but you're not necessarily knowing why. Okay, you can say it's from an experience. Okay, great. So then, functionally speaking, what can I actually do? Well, if it's a glitch in your nervous system or some injury part of your body or some injury part of a response, okay, now I know where it is. Now I know what the actual symptomologies are. So maybe I can cultivate and develop the opposite qualities. If what I'm experiencing is discomfort and a lack of ease and basically chronic constriction, then obviously ease, comfort, and in like in a release that's feeling strong and actually building strength is probably the opposite quality to build and to cultivate. Because the strength part is something that is not mentioned a lot, because just relaxing, just releasing, just letting go is just that. But you need to let go into something. You need to release into something. You need to replace that with something better or something greater. And hopefully that's going to actually make you stronger and make you more capable. But unfortunately, what often ends up happening is people go the opposite direction of like, well, I did all this release, I did all this letting go, I did all this processing, I did all this therapy, I did all this healing, but now I have all these dietary issues. I can't digest food. I can't eat these things. I have all these food allergies. I'm tired. I'm cold. I get sick easily. Life is very stressful. I can't go to the grocery store because the lights are too bright and too loud. I have all this environmental sensitivity. And then maybe if they go into spiritual things, they're like, yeah, I feel all these things and all these weird sensations in my nervous system. And they think, oh, it's good, it's positive. But no, it just means your nervous system is still whacked out and it's probably not very strong and is just developing maybe in the wrong direction. But then the problem is people hear, weird spiritual things and they think, oh, that's what this means, so I'm going in the right direction. It's like, no, that's not what they meant. And this is completely two different worlds, two different contexts, and two different complete opposite ends of the human experience that shouldn't be mixing and shouldn't be getting, homogenized and mixed together. So anyways, I'm at this point, I'm just kind of circling and going around the general theme of the video. So hopefully this has been helpful and useful. and put things, like I said, in more of a concrete, tangible kind of context.